Hello, my name is Alan Williams, and welcome to Entropy, which is going to be sort of my show about all the random corners of the internet. And I don't really have a set thing that I'm going to talk about every day, but it's just sort of my personality to talk about random things that I happen to know. Anyone that knows me knows that even if it's the most mundane conversation, I will have some totally, tangential, yet at least hopefully some interesting thing that relates to the topic at hand that I know about. And so I sort of chose the idea of entropy to sort of describe what I want to talk about, because it's really like how the universe works, right? If we think about entropy, and sort of the idea in physics that we have this inherent randomness in the universe. This inherent randomness is best visualized if you think about solids versus gases in physics, right? I have this pen. This pen is solid. I can break it, but generally, for the most part, nothing's going through this. But if we think about gases, gases are these floating particles of oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, everything else that makes up our atmosphere, and they're all bouncing around randomly. And this randomness is called entropy. And so I hope that through whatever this series is, that you learn a little bit more about the universe, perhaps even our small part in it. And just be able to know some interesting and perhaps random things. So today I wanted to start out by talking about one of the last remaining mysteries of planet Earth. These days with the internet and the availability of information at our fingertips, it gets harder and harder to have things that we have absolutely no clue how to even approach. And so today I wanted to talk about this not necessarily mysterious language, but this language that we really don't know or know much about. Now, I call it a language, and I know that's not necessarily the correct term. It's really a system of glyphs, as Wikipedia calls it, but this glyph language called Rongo Rongo is from Easter Island, right? You think of these little guys here, these statues, that's same place, Easter Island, which is off the coast of Chile. So if you sort of look at this odd cartograph map, and it takes away the dot if I go zoom in, but this is North America, South America, and this is Easter Island right here. And so what Rongo Rongo is a form of writing or proto-writing, and basically, there's been numerous attempts at deciphering this, but we still really don't know a whole lot about it. And it's kind of, the closest thing that I can relate it to, although it's very much not that, is ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, right? You have these glyphs that potentially mean something, and we don't really know what that meaning is. There's some obvious things like a fish or a crayfish or possibly someone eating someone standing, maybe a sea turtle here, and there's obviously really simple ones like a circle with some chevrons. But really, we know that this is probably a fish. This is probably a crayfish, but we don't necessarily know what the author was intending when they wrote those symbols. So see here, it's written, and usually these are written on tablets, or at least that's how they're found today. And so looking at these, we have all sorts of symbols. We have variations on those glyphs, and there's a whole collection of these, and so they've sort of developed these into what are called published corpuses, and essentially what those are, if you think of perhaps a collection of writings in a language, Latin, or like I said, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, you can go out into research institutions and find these corpuses that just contain text after text after text in these languages. And so, these, the decipherment is ongoing, and, there's a whole Wikipedia article just on decipherment, and it is, I don't know if you can even see the edge of my screen, but it goes on for quite a while, and there's all sorts of different attempts that have been made, lots of citations, and all sorts of books and papers written about it, and so it's really, really, really interesting in that regard, and that we don't know what these glyphs mean. But because the internet is wild and wonderful, the Unicode Consortium has tentatively allocated this hexadecimal range here for encoding the Rongo Rongo script. And as a technical person, this is another really interesting point for me. The Unicode Consortium, if you don't know a lot about it, is what allows people in the world that use computers to communicate, right? All of the letters in the alphabet are encoded. That's a obvious early start. But then we get into all sorts of really interesting things, right? You think of your emojis that you use every day when you're texting your friends, and you do the little smiley face, or the smiley face, or your I don't know, your little pumpkin, or whatever whatever crazy emoji that you like to use. All of those are encoded and allocated to certain range by the Unicode Consortium. And one of the things that I really like to tell people is that if you have an idea for an emoji and you can prove that it's a widely used symbol, that can eventually be converted into something that is literally in every phone, every messaging website, every messaging app, whatever. To give you an example of the kind of people that are within the Unicode Consortium is things like Google, Facebook, why am I blanking? Apple, all these major companies that have these major messaging platforms and communication platforms interact in the Unicode Consortium to determine what scripts are available and things like that. Now, emojis is the easy example because it's individual symbols, and we can designate this symbol as an emoji. And of course, it's different on every platform. Between an iPhone and an Android phone, your emojis may look slightly different, but they're all generally the same. And so, if you would want whatever your favorite idea for an emoji is, it's totally within reason to be able to get that published. And so, sort of tying it back, one of the interesting things to me about this wonderful idea of the Unicode Consortium is that we can even take, writing systems that we don't even know what they mean, and yet still be able to talk about them, to be able to put them in a format, in a text document, and be able to send them, and it really helps with research and all those different kinds of things, and I will say, as someone who has written in Middle Egyptian, which is the term used for ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics during the Middle Egyptian period, those being able to type hieroglyphics makes your life so much easier because there's so many of them. And if you want the little guy that's bowing down or whatever, there's a dozen variations of that, and being able to type the exact variation that you mean when you're trying to email someone and say, hey, I'm trying to understand this script, blah 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 blah, here's what I think the translation is, blah 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 blah. The ability to literally have a font that you can type, a little man bowing, blah 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 blah, is kind of a miracle of modern technology. So let me sort of get back to talking about Rongo Rongo. And so we've talked about how the Unicode Consortium has allocated this, but it's interesting to me that yes, we have this sort of modern mystery, but think about even ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, right? Before we had what was the Rosetta Stone, and I've already kind of queued this up. Before we had what was the Rosetta Stone, which is this thing, the Rosetta Stone has ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. It has, I believe this is Demotic, followed by, I believe, Greek, if I'm gonna, yeah, ancient Greek. And so, having this sort of one-to-one translation is what allowed us really to begin to decipher the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic language. So, sort of going into that, the history of that, it was originally discovered near the town of Rosetta, hence why it's called Rosetta Stone, in July 1799 by a French officer, Pierre-Francois Bouchard. And so really this discovery of this, it's literally just a rock with writing on it, is what allowed us to begin to uncover the amazing language and history and culture of the ancient Egyptian world. And so, not that I'm saying that Rongo Rongo will suddenly have some miracle of a discovery that, there's this tablet or whatever that has, Rongo Rongo and some other script that we do know the meanings for. But, I can always have hope. And so, to sort of end this rambling talk today, I just wanted to talk about one more thing, and let me pull that up. And so this is to talk about really the idea that part of the name Rongo Rongo, or really the name Rongo Rongo, is translated in the Rapa Nui language to recite, to declaim, to chant out, right? And so, to me, part of what I want to do with this series is to really help do that, to help bring some light, to chant out the idea that, the world is such an amazing place. There's so much that we know, but there's also so much that we don't know. And by taking small steps to not necessarily solving all the world's problems, not necessarily becoming the best person that we could possibly be, if we just work on taking small steps in learning about the world around us, whether it's just going on a walk down the street, whether it's exploring random corners of the internet, I hope that you will be sort of self-empowered in the idea that by having these random factoids, that may not necessarily be useful in a moment or really any moment, by expanding your knowledge, you gain this appreciation for exploration and for understanding. And by doing this, hopefully you feel empowered to be a guide for others and helping them to understand the world around them, but also to help them understand others' view of the world around them. So much these days we have fights about who's right, who's wrong, what's true, what's not true. And, while, you can say things are true, things are not true, people are going to believe one thing and people are going to believe another thing. With Rongo Rongo, there's all these people that have spent years and years and years and lifetimes trying to understand what this writing system is, and we still don't have a consensus on what any of this means. And yet people still try. And I hope that, you feel like you can try. You can, put your best effort in, and whether it's solving Rongo Rongo, whether it's, talking to a friend you may not agree with, whether it's just, doing some crazy thing, by doing those things, you can help make the world a better place. And so with that, I leave you today with the hope that by knowing the entropy of the world around you, that you may become a better person. With that, bye-bye.